All right. Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this executive committee meeting to order at 9:33 a.m. But before we begin, we'll start off with the territorial land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the SFSS is located on the traditional, unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Coquitlam, and Katzie First Nations. Unceded means these territories have never been handed over, sold, or given up by these nations, and we are currently situated on occupied territories. I'm now going to go through the roll call of attendance. When I call on your position, please state your name, your pronouns, and if you have any access needs that need to be met. I will start with myself this morning. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen. I use she, her pronouns, and all my access needs are met for today. Over to our VP Internal.
Hi, everyone. My name is Judith, she, her pronouns, and all my access needs are met.
All right. Thank you. Over to our VP Finance.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby, he, him pronouns, all my access needs are met.
Thank you. VP UAA is not here. VP External.
Hi everyone, my name is Ishana, she, her pronouns, access needs met.
All right, thank you. To our acting VP Equity and Sustainability.
Hi everyone, my name is Arthur, pronoun he, him, all my access needs are met.
Great. And over to our VP Events.
Hello everyone, my name is Weber and my pronouns are he, him, his. My access needs are met. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Over to our society staff or board organizer.
Hi everyone. I'm gonna figure out a way to rename myself, but this is Ella, pronoun she, her, hers, and all my access needs are met this morning.
Great, thank you. Over to our facilities manager.
Hi all, John here, he, him, his, and all my access needs are met.
Great. Our temporary operations organizer.
Hi all, Sindhu here, pronoun she, her, hers. All my access needs are met.
Great, thank you, Sindhu. Over to, actually no, our policy research coordinator is not here today. Our admin assistant.
Hi everyone, my name is Fanny, pronoun she, her. In terms of access needs, it could be noisy in the area I am right now. So I'll be asking people to repeat or just type in the chat. Yep, thank you.
All right, thanks, Fanny. Great. We're now going to go over to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. We have matters arising from the minutes, which are just the last two executive committee meeting minutes. So we're going to go ahead. Actually, no, the motion reads, be it resolved to adopt the consent agenda by unanimous consent. Let's go ahead and do that. So seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, the consent agenda is carried. We're now going to go to item 5 on the agenda, which is adoption of the agenda. The motion reads, be it resolved to adopt the agenda as presented. May I have a mover?
VP Internal.
VP Internal moves. Someone to second.
Equity second.
Equity seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. If you have any contributions, please list yourself in the chat and I will recognize your list. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm going to move to amend the agenda, and I'm going to move this as a batch because there's a lot. So I'm going to move to strike 11.2, updating booking systems. I am also going to amend to add 2 new business items. The first of it being, I'm going to put all this in the chat, is mental health first aid reimbursement for the board organizer. Thank you for completing that, Ella. The second new business item will be, the title of it will be SFSS Community Guidelines Interim Enactment. Also in the chat now, and I will also amend on 2 new discussion items. One of them is going to be hours of work survey, and the second of them will be social media comments guidelines. And I will drop any and all relevant attachments in the chat, but I'm going to move these as a batch.
Okay, great. Give me 1 second to get these all set up on my end. Okay, so Judith has moved these amendments. Can anyone second them?
VP Finance.
VP Finance seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion on these amendments. Seeing none, we'll take these amendments to a vote. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, these amendments are carried. Any other lists? Okay, seeing that there's none, I will just add one list here. Vibov. Okay, my apologies, Vibov. I didn't see it. You have the floor.
Okay, I'm moving to amend the agenda to have a new in-camera discussion item. I will just type it down here. Okay, so I have stated that in the chat. I'm moving this, yes.
Okay, so you want this as a new in-camera discussion item called a new club proposal issue, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
new
all right.
section.
So we will have to add a in-camera section for in-camera, a section for X-camera. So looking on the agenda, that would be, give me a sec here, 2, 3, consent adoption. We'll add it as the new section 12 and then new section 13 of the agenda. So it'll be right after discussion items. So we'll have a motion to go in camera and a motion to go X camera, including the discussion item for in camera. So Vibov has moved these amendments. Can anyone second these amendments?
VP Internal.
VP Internal seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take these amendments to a vote. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, these amendments are carried. I'll head over to my last list of the day. I have 2 amendments to make. The first amendment is to add a new Section 6 titled Ratification of Regrets. And a new motion 6.1 underneath that titled Ratification of Regrets. And the motion will read, be it resolved to ratify the regrets of Nicole Kiergan, VP University and Academic Affairs, to the Friday, October 28th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting. And I also want to add in one more discussion item, and it will be titled scheduling next executive committee meeting. I'll add that as the last discussion item of all the discussion items we have on the agenda, both on there or amended. So I move these amendments. Can anyone second these?
VP Finance.
VP Finance seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take these amendments to a vote. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, these amendments are carried. I'm going to cut the speakers list here, and we'll just go ahead back over to the amended motion, which will now read, be it resolved to adopt the agenda as amended. We're going to go ahead and take a vote on the question. I'm going to seek unanimous consent. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Okay, seeing none, this motion is carried as amended. We're now going to go over to the next item on the agenda, which is ratification of regrets. Motion 6.1 is ratification of regrets. The motion reads, be it resolved to ratify the regrets of Nicole Kiergan, VP University and Academic Affairs, to the Friday, October 28th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting. I'll move this motion. Can someone second?
VP Internal.
VP Internal seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and take this to a vote. I'll seek unanimous consent. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, this motion is carried. With that done, we're now going to go ahead over to new business. we have 3 new business items today. First things first on the agenda is ratification of actions taken, executive office opening. The motion reads, whereas the executive committee unanimously voted via a motion to lock the main door to the executive offices on August 12th, 2022 for safety concerns, whereas past practice and procedure called for a formal motion to lock the office. Whereas the members of the executive committee discussed opening the executive's office main door on October 14th, 2022 executive committee meeting. Whereas a motion is required to go ahead with opening the office as it took one to lock it, whereas the main office door has been unlocked without following proper procedure as requested by the president, be it resolved that the executive committee retroactively approve the opening of the executive office. Can I have a mover for this motion? VP Internal moves. I'll second it. Gonna open the floor for discussion. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, we're just gonna do this retroactively to ratify the actions because ultimately it took a motion to lock it. This was a very vivid conversation we had last semester where we talked about locking it, and that wasn't sufficient to actually lock it. We had to pass a motion at the meeting after that to lock it. So we can't have we can't abandon procedure and past practice for convenience. So at least given the fact that it's on paper that we used the motion to lock it, we will need to do it again to unlock it. We need to follow procedure and not abandon it for convenience. So if people wanted to unlock it, we can unlock it. That's it. I don't really care, but at least let's do it properly. By the way, I do remember Ishana raising the concern at the meeting. Thank you, Ishana, for bringing it up. You were right.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Arthur, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm gonna say if we take a motion to unlock it, we probably should have took a motion to unlock it. Now, with that being said, is it procedurally correct? Then yes, we'll do it. But with that being said, I was thinking more. I don't know if it's a relevant topic, but given what happened yesterday, I suggest we look into why Ishana and my office are like not being locking when I think that we're supposed to lock it after we left. So Ishana, for context, Ishana's office was not locked yesterday and yesterday morning, and mine apparently was after I left to come home to do the AGM. So I'm not sure what's going on. So I suggest that we look into it.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, to give some context here, yesterday I came in the morning and I was trying to grab something from the storage and I saw that Ishana's door was open. I just assumed that she came in while I was downstairs in the admin office. So when I texted her whether she was in, she told me she wasn't. And she was asking me then why was the door open? It was the whole thing. I ended up locking it for her. Like, I think it was actually locked, just the door wasn't closed properly. So I just pulled it closed and it was locked after. But I'm kind of concerned to hear that Arthur did lock his office, but then it wasn't locked. That's weird. Because people can only enter those spaces with their own key or the master key. Yeah, that's weird.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Abby, you have the floor.
Yeah, I was going to give context to Arthur's thing. It's actually the exact same thing where the door itself, the handle was locked, but the door was open. There was a little bit of space between the door and the frame. So Helen and I, we'd finished the AGM, and I think we were decompressing, and then we kind of noticed like Arthur's door was a bit ajar, and then it was like, okay. And we had just again noticed that morning that happened to Ishana, so we were a bit sussed out. So I think Helen called Arthur and took a picture of it and stuff. But this is concerning because if like one exec's door is open, then this could mean people have access to the exec offices, or so I don't know what could potentially be wrong, but it's a safety concern for sure.
Okay, thank you, Abby. So it seems like doors are being randomly opened because it's happened to Ishana, Arthur. John, you have a direct response?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm not sure how relevant this is to that motion that we're discussing at the moment, but it is something that like you can bring to my attention outside of exec and that we'll look into. And there can be loads of reasons, like just a door not being fully locked or not being closed behind or not being sealed. And it's hard to kind of figure out exactly what the cause is unless it's like a pattern. So like I can check the doors and check the locks and make sure that the locking mechanisms on the doors are correct. But every so often, sometimes people can think they've locked the door. It can be open behind them. It may not be. But yeah, so just pass on the information, Arthur, to yours, and I'll have a look at that too. And if there is anything to report back, I'll let you know.
All right, thank you, John. Is there any more discussion on this? Also, maybe I'll make a note for John, though. Arthur's door is very hard to close as well. It's been like that for a little bit of time. So you might want to talk with Arthur about getting that fixed or something. So, because we spoke about that over call last night. So helping him out there would be great. If there's no more discussion on this, I'm going to suggest that we take this motion to a vote. I'm going to reread the motion again. And the motion reads, whereas the executive committee unanimously voted via a motion to lock the main door to the executive offices on August 12, 2022 for safety concerns, whereas past practice and procedure called for a formal motion to lock the office, whereas the members of the executive committee discussed opening the executive office's main door on October 14th, 2022 executive meeting, whereas a motion is required to go ahead with opening the office as it took one to lock it, whereas the main office door has been unlocked without following proper procedure as requested by the president, be it resolved that the executive committee retroactively approve the opening of the executive office. We're going to go ahead and take this straight to a vote. I think what I'll do just in case is I'll go through roll call vote. So we'll go ahead and I'll start with myself and go down our executive committee composition. When I call on your position, please state how you're voting, whether you're in favor, against, or abstaining from the vote. I will start with myself. I'll vote in favor of this motion. VP Internal?
In favor.
VP Internal votes in favor. VP Finance?
In favor.
VP Finance votes in favor. VP External?
In favor.
VP External votes in favor. Acting VP Equity?
In favor.
Acting VP Equity votes in favor. VP Events?
Put in favor in the chat.
All right, thank you. With that said, everyone has voted in favor. No against, no abstentions, so this motion is carried. We're now going to go over to the next item under new business, which is 10.2 mental health first aid reimbursement board organizer. Oop, I'm just going to copy paste it into the chat. Okay, the motion reads 10.2 mental health first aid reimbursement board organizer, whereas Union Acute Management has been asked by the executive committee to complete their mental health first aid certification to prepare for an in-person return for the fall 2022 semester, whereas professional development is covered by the SFSS for management, whereas the training has been completed on October 14th, 2022 by the board organizer, whereas both the invoice and certification has been provided to the VP Internal and Organizational Development, confirming the completion of the training, be it resolved to reimburse the board organizer, Emanuela Draco, for $194.02 Canadian from line item 945/32. I'll move this motion. Can someone second?
VP Finance.
VP Finance seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Abby, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'm just going to speak to the line item a little bit. We couldn't find a perfect line item for this. So 945/32 seemed to be the closest thing to something, and I'll look into for the next year of budgeting if there's something other way I can allocate for this.
All right, thank you, Abby. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this marks all of union excluded management who have completed training, so they're all have their mental health first aid now. So let's just get Ella her money back.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Anyone else before I close off the speakers list? Okay, seeing no further discussion, we're going to go ahead and take this straight to a vote. I will seek unanimous consent. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, this motion is carried. We're now going to go over to the last item under new business, which is 10.3 SFSS community guidelines, interim enactment. Drop it in the chat. The motion reads, whereas the student union building sub has officially been open and operational for a year, whereas the sub provides study spaces, services, and a place of work for students and staff. Whereas guidelines or policies for respectful and safe use of the sub currently do not exist, whereas guidelines have been prepared to keep the sub safe and welcoming for all. Be it resolved that the executive committee approve the SFSS community guidelines as attached for a probationary interim period of 3 months. Be it further resolved that these guidelines shall be referred to council for an operational and organizational evaluation and a potential extension at the end of the interim period. May I have a mover for this motion?
VP internal.
VP internal moves. Someone to second?
Equity second.
VP equity seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, so what we're doing here is basically putting guidelines in place. It basically outlines that we are not going to tolerate violence in the building. It outlines how to be respectful, not to discriminate against people. So threats, anything like that will not be tolerated. So it's just basically community guidelines that we did not have prior. So now we're going to have them for this interim period to see how they work. They did go through consultation process, so we're hoping that it's going to work well. But yeah, we will reassess after 3 months. The idea is just put something in place to see how it goes and if it needs to be altered or how we would go about it. And eventually my expectation is that in a couple of months' time, even if a council to look at it, probably will become more of a policy than a guideline. But for now, we're just going to stick with guideline to see how it goes.
All right, thank you, Judith. Ishana, you have the floor.
Hey, I just want to say that this seems like an awesome idea to have some community guidelines. I'm just wondering, who is involved in making these as well? Because I was looking at it and I feel like it's all right. And I know, Judith, you said we'll look at it after and stuff too. But I'm just wondering, with CGs were involved, I just want to make sure no harm is done or these guidelines aren't misinterpreted and things, because I know with words like violent and things like that, it can harm racialized folks as well. So just wondering about that.
Judith, do you have a direct response?
Yeah, it went out with the entire staff mail and for consultation. So it did go through the consultation process, including everybody was a staff mail, including CG staff.
Question in the chat, how long was given for consultation? Yep, Judith, you have a direct response.
My understanding there was, I think, 4 or 5 days. I could be wrong, however. I wasn't the one who sent it out, but I think it was around a couple of days. So people could actually put in their feedback.
Okay, next on the speakers list is Abby.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor of this. I think that having some set of community guidelines is a good starting point, and I think 3 months is enough time where we can gather conclusions and see if they're working or not, and we can always reevaluate at that point.
Thank you, Abby. Over to Arthur.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna say I like the idea for putting we need to actually have some form of a model in order to figure out what it's gonna do it right and what it's gonna do wrong. So that's a good thing that we're doing here. But I also wanted to note that Shauna, if we think that we want to make sure, I understand your concern about CG not being like, consulted, or like, we don't want to do harm to what's already there. So if it helps, I can address this to the CG. I can bring it up with them and see what they have been talking about it, or what their suggestion or their comment would be at that point, and then we can try to see where it works from there.
Thank you, Arthur. Ishana, you're on the list again.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wondering maybe if CGs could be talked to first. I just don't feel comfortable if they don't know about these guidelines. Yeah, I just feel like we should talk to them first, or other folks who are housed in the sub.
Okay, thank you, Ishana. Judith, you have a list again?
Yeah, I'm just going to the consultation doc right now just to see who commented on there, and we do have CG staff who have commented on the document providing feedback.
All right, thank you, Judith. I'm going to ask if there's any more discussion before I close off the speakers list. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll go ahead and take a vote on the question. I'm going to seek unanimous consent here. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, this motion is carried. That is the end for new business. We're now going to go over to discussion items. We have a few on our agenda today, including the ones amended on. First off, we have discussion item 11.1, executive SOP, submitted by Judith. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, so this was kind of delayed a bit. I do want to give people a heads up. Arthur, I'm really sorry. This might be a thing you have to do as well. So as some of you may know, the SFSS doesn't just use policy, bylaws and such. We also have standard operating procedures, which are not on the same highest rank, but it kind of helps people tell how they're supposed to do their jobs and how things operate in this organization. So some of you may or may not know, we are behind on our SOP schedule. They were meant to be completed on February in 2021. They have not been, so we are playing catch up with literally departments and everybody. So everyone is working on them. A suggestion that was raised to me by our policy research and community affairs coordinator was to do as executive SOPs as well. So as some of you may know, when we came into our roles, we were not given much help on what was going on and how to do our jobs. So a couple of things. Some of you may have draft SOPs in your drive. So I'm going to ask everyone today to look. I have some bullet point notes as draft SOPs for VP internal that aren't exactly clear what that means. So please look. If you do not have a draft SOP, please start drafting one. So what you should include in that? You should include things in relation to what your role is. So clearly define it. Define what your portfolio entails, because it's in bylaws, sure, but when you actually take office, that might be a bit different. So please outline that and outline things that you need to do. For example, I'm VP internal. I'll have to outline how to do policy reconciliation, how to do policy consultation, how to submit things in job form, which I think would go for everybody here, how to call committee meetings, which is part of the admin SOP, but maybe for execs, break it down bit by bit so the next people coming after us will not be like messing it up. But basically just outline what your role does and how to do it, basically. One thing I would caution people against, do not include projects you did as a requirement for them to do it. Most people will have the chance to do whatever they want with their SOPs, as their portfolios when they take office. So like, for example, I will not be requiring the next VP internal to table with student care because that's not a requirement, that's a project I took on. But I will be including mandatory, like you have to like help plan the AGM, for example, that is mandatory. So when you're doing it, think of it like what is mandatory your role to do and how you do it, and how to break it down to a person coming in who doesn't really know. because the idea is that they should be trained on their portfolios before they come into office. But once they do come into office, they might need something in writing to actually figure out how to do things. So if you do not have a draft, please start drafting one. The goal for it is to be done by the conclusion of the general elections in the spring, which should be in February, I think, 19th. So by then I want it done so we can hand it off to the incoming executive. So please get going on that. If you have a draft, please review the draft to see what can be added, fixed, clarified, or if you have to rewrite it. So that gives you a couple months to do it. Just want to give you a heads up, get going on it so we can have some proper transitioning for the years to come. But I see things in the chat, so I'm going to stop talking and see if anybody has any questions.
All right, thank you, Judith. See the speakers list here. Abby, you have the floor.
Thank you, Helen. And Judith, I do have questions, 2 of them. Well, actually, first, let me start off by saying thank you for bringing this up. I think it's a great idea. And I think executive SOPs will smooth over the transition for the next group of execs, so that's great. My first question is, are we just listing specific duties relating to our position, or should we include the duties of executives as well in our SOPs, so the general executive? Second question would be, what kind of format are you looking for? Are we allowed to make it like more like interface friendly, or should we keep it like fairly formal?
Judith, do you have a direct response?
So I would suggest you stick it to your portfolio. As of now, what the executive committee can and cannot do is kind of clear in bylaw, but isn't clear as to how you actually operationalize your own role. So I would say stick to your portfolio for now. Regarding formatting, I recommend you prepare a rough draft first, but there is like an SOP standard like format you can use that BD has. So once you have a rough draft, I will let BD know that we're ready for the template. I just want to make sure the content is ready. If you mean like adding like screenshots and like little arrows, like this is how you submit a job form submission. You can definitely do that because current SOPs do have like screenshots and like verbatim point by point like explanations how to do things for even things like setting up your Gmail. So you can be as thorough as you'd like. Think of it this way. If you're someone completely new coming in, would you know how to do this? If the answer is no, you probably should explain it.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Ishana, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I actually reached out to BD about the SOP. So should I cancel that meeting since we're already talking about it here and we're gonna get more information? Because I just reached out to her for like help on it because I knew that we'd probably have to do something like this. But let me know if I should like keep that meeting or just wait till we like kind of do that like with our own timeline in exec.
Yep, Judith, go for it.
Yeah, I told BD a while back that I was bringing this to exec, but it kept getting delayed. So I will let her know that now everybody's flagged and now I gave everybody work to do. So I will let her know. The general SOPs, if you mean like staff and department, Ishana, my understanding is they're being finalized currently. So I think those will be done as well soon. But ours obviously isn't because we only have drafts or have none at all. So again, if folks can start working on that, so we have something ready by the end of general elections.
Arthur, you have the floor.
Question for Judith here. So I understand that this is something I will have to do as well on my role. Her acting VP Equity Sustainability. Seeing that, I just wondered that seeing that we have voting period coming up with the election and all, do you think that it's best for me to complete it by, I don't know, end of a voting period before the election ends? Because seeing that I don't want to be like drafting the SOP and then suddenly before I can finish it, the next person already come along with whoever the election result coming out. So I was just wondering like what day do you think I should get it done by on my part?
Judith, go for it.
Yeah, Arthur, you are kind of in a weird position, because you're acting. So, and you're also a candidate. So I would recommend that everybody here, with the exception of Arthur, gets going on this as soon as possible. Arthur, I recommend you actually wait until like the by-election results come in. Because if you didn't win, you should obviously just let whoever did work on it. And BD and myself can help with the VP equity, whoever won, drafting their SOP. But yeah, that's fair, because it would not be fair to make you do it if you're not the acting VP equity moving forward. But if you do win, after the election results come in, please start working on it if you can.
All right. Any more discussion on this? Okay, Arthur, you also have a direct response. I'll allow it.
Well, quickly follow up with that question here. So is it possible if that like when you're drafting, the person that come after me say they're drafting the one that I was supposed to draft for SOP, is it possible if I can join in on that little conversation as well and help them kind of figure out how they can do it?
Yep, Judith, go for it.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that if they're open to helping, and it's possible they don't want you to help with that. It's possible. So I think we should reassess for your role specifically after the elections conclude and go from there. But yeah, that's an option if you want to discuss it if you don't win with the other VP equity, for sure.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing no further discussion, let's go over to the next discussion item. 11.2 has been stricken off the agenda, so let's go over to 11.3, which is now the new 11.2, which is LOAs around access to subspaces with groups that have seats on council. Judith, it's your discussion item. You have the floor.
Yeah, so a couple of things about this. This is something that was flagged to us, I want to say, over the summer. So just wanted to circle back to it, see if people have any thoughts or any further feelings on the matter. So as some of you may know, we have, usually when people have spaces with us, they either have a letter of agreement or some kind of MOU of some sort to basically like tell them like whether they can use our spaces, how they use our spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So we have a couple groups who are affiliated student groups also, who, for example, have seats on council, but don't necessarily have letters of agreements or a memorandum of understanding with us. So a good example of that would be the Residence Hall Association. They have a council seat, but they don't have any agreements with us as to how they use their spaces or so, which is kind of posing a bit of a liability on us, because everybody else who is an ASG who has a city council has a letter of agreement or MOU with us as well. And because they're an affiliated student group, they aren't actually under the SFSS, so they don't have the same kind of privileges as groups under the SFSS would. So I wanted to see if we can circle back to it and get those done so people can actually book the spaces properly and we have our paperwork in order. But I also know that John, I think, wants to speak to this as well. So if he wants to speak, he can go ahead. But I just want to list and talk about that a bit.
Thank you, Judith. Ishana says that she retracts for John. So John, you have the floor.
Yeah, so Judith's given kind of the big overview of it there. So effectively what it is that we do provide free space in the building. So like they can utilize bookings in the building and for anybody that's affiliated with the SFSS. And prior to the recent changes in council, and this was all covered by letters of agreements or leases that we had with people in the building. And within those documents, it did specify that they did get access to bookings in the building. But since then, we have had TSSU reach out, and I know, Judy, you've mentioned RHA is another one, and they haven't reached out just yet. But we don't actually have any written agreement anywhere that details that they do get access free of charge to the bookings in the building. And so it's just about tidying that up, like having letters of agreements with these groups just to lay out the terms, and then also just to specify that they do get access because they are affiliated. And then something that we probably need to look at is kind of the next level of this too, that like when we are providing access free of charge to all of these different groups, should we also look at kind of like the criteria for those bookings? Like, so should it be bookings that are within their mandate? Or do you look at like extending it that if they're in affiliation with somebody else, it's okay for the booking to go ahead as well? And because we are finding that like people will team up together just to get access to free bookings when they're not kind of directly related. So they're just different things to think about kind of in that LOA altogether. But the most important thing is just documenting that there is a relationship between the two organizations and that they do get access to bookings in the sub.
All right, thank you, John. Anyone have any other lists? Okay, I'm seeing the movement in the chat again. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, for sure. I concur with John. I think if you do have paperwork in order to make sure everything is ready to go and there's clear guidelines and procedure as to how these things go regarding bookings. And I also wanted to flag, because I know we have MSGP that would outline, and a couple of things I want to like flag about MSGP. We do have policy that has been updated based on the last council for constituency groups, as in their LOAs and how that works in dedicated levy section are added into MSGP 3, which does outline any to abide by their LOAs and levies, which is fine. But we also have affiliated student groups mentioned in this policy, lower than I think MSGP 6. But I do want to flag that doesn't say anything about like space bookings and like what kind of rights they have. All they say is that we recognize them as an external organization to the SFSS that also serves the undergraduate or graduate membership. That's what the language we have currently in policy. It doesn't actually specify as to how would our booking system work for them or what kind of like rights they have within the organization. We did give them council seats, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have access to the same like booking rights as like a constituency or a club or a DSU or any kind of group like that would. So I do think I agree with John, we should specify what that means and how that works for them as well. And maybe get started with discussions about them drafting those LOAs with them as well.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Ishana, you have the floor.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, I think it'd be awesome if we start working on an LOA for this. I think it'd be really cool if RJ folks can start using the spaces more and if we have like those specific guidelines. But yeah, sounds awesome. Hopefully we can get that done and RHA folks can start using the spaces more.
All right, thank you, Ishana. Any more discussion on the floor? Yep, Judith, go for it.
So I just wanted to confirm here, do we have to go ahead, John and myself, to sit down and start looking at like groups and reaching out and getting these conversations going? Can I get like virtual thumbs up by execs here? Because based on this one singular thumbs up from Abby, I think I do not have to go ahead. So I need like actual explicit, can we go ahead with this discussion with the groups?
Well, I think it should be all right. Thumbs are going up, so.
Awesome, thank you.
I'll give you a physical thumbs up right here.
Okay. All right, I guess that's no more discussion on that front. So let's go ahead over to the next item on the agenda. It is space allocation submitted by our VP External. Ishana, you have the floor.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, so I've been walking around the sub and being in the sub and seeing it open. I've noticed that a lot of students look for like more spaces to study. Like whenever I'm by the Go desk, I always hear someone being like, can this like room get open? So I'm just wondering, maybe John, you can help me out with this. Like, can we open, like, for example, if like the large boardroom isn't being used or the ballroom isn't being used, like, can we set it up so students can have like spaces to like study or chill or just hang out? So just more rooms are open and the sub is being used more. I just wanted to see what other execs thought about this. It's just from what I've heard and seen in the sub.
John, go for it.
Yeah, so just in relation to that, like just because a space isn't occupied at a time doesn't mean that it's not going to be occupied like shortly after and need to be set up and different things. So all of our team rooms are fully available. So there's 15 rooms that are fully available from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. at the moment. And then we have our 2 meeting rooms on 2, which are bookable spaces. The 1 meeting room by the community kitchen, that's a bookable space. The board meeting room and the ballroom that are bookable spaces. And in the bookable spaces, we do event setups. So we do need time to be able to get in there. And then we also need like a good portion of time to be able to get those setups done. So it's not really feasible just to open up the bookable spaces, but all of those 15 team rooms are fully accessible and can be accessed by just going down to the desk if needs be on the day. But the bookable spaces, it's not really feasible to do that.
Thank you, John. Any more questions or discussion on this? Okay, Judith, go for it.
Sorry, I meant to listen instead of direct responded. I just had a question. I understand like the frustration for students who don't know how our booking system works, and I've seen Shelly's like calendar. It's really like intense for bookings. So I was wondering, I'm not sure if this is allowed or not. Would it be possible to almost like post like a schedule somewhere people can see it that these rooms are actually being used? And the reason the doors aren't open is because we are like preparing for setup, because I think that might help with the disgruntled feeling about it. I'm not sure that's an option we have. It might be a lot of work to do that every single day. I'm just wondering because, yeah, I see how like if people walk past it, they're like, oh, it's empty. But like 5 minutes later, building staff is coming in to set it up. I just want to make sure they don't like think that we're purposefully locking the door when we don't have to. I'm not sure that's an option we have, or is that like redundant? I'm not sure. I'm just wondering.
Johnny, you have a direct response?
Yeah, so one thing I'd just like to say is that like this is the first that we're hearing of this disgruntledness or people having issues with regards to this. So like I wouldn't want to jump and make any decisions right now until we've looked into this a little bit further. In terms of like displaying what bookings are in spaces, it's something that can be explored, but I can also kind of just say from previous experience that it actually makes people very uncomfortable sometimes. Having their details advertised that people would be able to know what's happening in certain times outside of their own community if they haven't advertised it publicly too. So there are things that just need to be considered for that particular thing. If it's something that you want us to look into, like as I said, we can definitely look into it and kind of like get back to you on it. It's just the first that we're hearing of it now, and I wouldn't be comfortable making any decisions on the spot about anything.
All right, thank you, John. Ishana, you had a list earlier.
Judith has a direct response.
Oh, my apologies. Judith, go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, we don't have to put necessarily the groups or person's name who booked it, but would it be possible to say like booked from, I don't know, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.? I don't know if that's an option. Yeah, definitely look into it more. We can probably look and see how much of this is an issue. But I'm just wondering if you can just like basically like almost like just show the block off time as to when people book the space or not. But that's all.
John, you have a direct response?
Yeah, so definitely, as I said, like something we can look into, like it's just I wouldn't want to make a decision on it because there could be ways of doing it. But then with that, you just need to remember that we have to put it into somebody's workload to create those lists every night, the format, take the information from Excel, put it in. So it's just something that I can't commit to until there's a wider discussion on it. But if it's something that people do want to see, like you just task us to look into it and get back to you on like what's feasible and what's not. And we can definitely do that.
Thank you, John. Back over to the speakers list. Ishana, you have a list from earlier.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I just want to say I agree with Judith. Thank you, John, for looking into this. That'd be awesome.
Thank you, Ishana. Arthur, you have the floor.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna throw this idea out here for a little bit of a little context. A while ago, I know that SoCal had a Black Student Study Hall kind of event thing in their own space. So while I understand that no booking for ballroom or boardroom like that, it could kind of like open student union and other student group that are going to outside of faith to do their event and stuff. I'm wondering if it's possible that some of the exec can like book it off during like say midterm season or final season or whatever that may be, and then we can host like some sort of like a study hall event where you can come use the ballroom, or not a ballroom, not the boardroom on the fourth floor, and then have people to come use that space to study. If that's a better option, we can go with. Because honestly, I kind of feel like if the space is remain close to just exclusive to student group and student union, it's probably not going to be accessible. And I see a bunch of people trying to find a space in stuff as a reason because of midterm season. So I thought, would that be an option to go if we can do some similar sources, take some cue from SoCal or something like that.
John, you have a direct response.
Yeah, so in terms of block booking spaces during periods of time to provide like extra study spaces, and that is something that we did last year. So like when we weren't permitted to have events because of COVID restrictions and different things, we did like open up the ballroom, put in study desks, and then do a silent study area in the ballroom. And so block bookings for periods where you want to increase study in the building is definitely something that can be done. But what you need to remember is just that when you're doing that, you're taking away event space because you can't turn over those events. And we actually have very little space for events in the building. We only really have 2 spaces where we can do events for more than 40 people. That's the board meeting room and the ballroom. And so it's just a decision in terms of like your servicing students and your remit. Like, do you want to have spaces for people to have events in the building, or do you want to have more study space? So it's a trade-off between the two because you can't always have both. And then a lot of the feedback that I've been hearing just in terms of is that people want to see more vibrancy in the building and they don't want it to turn into a study hall because the library is just across the way from the student union building. And so they're all just factors that need to be considered. And so with this, like, it's really what direction you would like to move in. And from looking at the bookings, and like we can give you information on booking data, like we are getting a lot of bookings into the ballroom and into these rooms for events, particularly around Christmas. People want to do socials and things like that as well. But it is just the decision of like, if you want to close off one of these areas, we don't have an event space then. So all the events have to go outside the building.
All right. Thank you, John. Ishana, you have another list?
Yeah, thanks, Helen. Yeah, that sounds good because I know for myself I don't want the sub to be like a study space, so definitely not like prioritizing studying over events. I'm just wondering, like, however, like if we don't like have a booking like in the ballroom for like a week, could we like open that space up, or is that not? Because I know for the ballroom we have to use like we have to book it like 20 days in advance. So if we know that it won't be booked for a while, is that something we could look into, or is that not feasible?
John, go for it.
Yeah, so what we're seeing with the ballroom at the moment is that there's a little blip because we did have to close it for a period of time because we had that water damage. But that space is actually consistently booked. Like if there isn't a booking in there every night, it's every second night. So again, we can give you the statistics on this. So like I'll send on all the figures because I think that might be the gap here. I do think there's a bit of misinformation circulating around the place about like the sub not actually being vibrant or having events. Like we're pretty much at capacity in our event spaces all of the time, but it doesn't look that way because we've had these troubles where we've had to shut down the space for a long period of time and then it's been empty. And then in order to process the bookings and need the lead time, it can take between 10 to 20 days, depending on the complexity of the booking. So we're actually getting right back into ramping up into every single day there being things in that space. But it is something that could be looked at outside of that. But just so people are aware, it is that there is a high occupancy for event bookings. It's just that it may not appear that way if you're not looking at the booking figures, that's all.
All right, thank you, John. Is there any other more discussion on this before we move on to the next discussion item? Okay, seeing no further discussion on this, we're now going to head over to the next discussion item, which is student activities, again, submitted by our VP External. So Shauna, you have the floor. It's your discussion item.
Thank you. Yeah, just once again, talking about vibrancy and things like that, just feedback that I got from students. We were wondering if we could, I think I was talking to one of the building coordinators and they said that they had like a whole plan of like how we could get more like activities and stuff in the sub. I was wondering if maybe we could like buy some board games or get like ping pong tables. I don't know. I know this is something that we can talk to like Abby about, but like have something that students can like, I don't know, even with the ping pong tables, like book and then we can like have it in a space. I honestly have no clue what this would look like. I just want to see like what execs think, like how we can get like more games and like more people out like at late night in the sub too. Because it's so nice in the sub.
All right, John, you have a direct response.
Yeah, so this is something the building team, we actually did a full proposal for, and it went to SPOC before. And the proposal consisted of like increasing vibrancy in different areas around the sub. So like any area where it wouldn't impact people's use of the space to add in like board games or foosball tables or things like that. So all that work is done, the assessment is there. And I think what it might be best is to take it to SPOC. And then let SPOC approve it, because it should come in under the 10 grand if we're just buying a little bit of equipment in different spaces. So that's something that like we can revive and take to SPOC if that works for people.
Shauna, you have a direct response.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, John. If we could take that to SPOC, I think it'd be really awesome. Thank you for bringing that up.
Abby, you have a list.
Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna say the members of SPOC have already had interest in this. It was something I talked about at SPOC last year and this year in discussions. We called it almost a vibrancy project. So little things like domed foosball or domed air hockey tables were stuff we were interested in. So yeah, you can definitely, if you want to join in on that meeting, we can definitely talk about that.
All right, thank you, Abby. Any more discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, let's go over to the next discussion item. It is extension of BC's tuition limit policy to include international students and other student unions and organizations. Ishana, this is also your discussion item, so you have the floor.
Yeah, so I actually brought this to the exec working session. So during lobby days, I was with a lot of other like student unions, student organizations. We're like, okay, we're never going to really have this time together again in person. And we started kind of like brainstorming what kind of campaigns and stuff we could work on like collectively. So what we kind of saw was that like the government keeps pushing back on like not extending that tuition limit policy for international students. So what we want to do is we want to push like super hard for it. So I'm just letting you know that they're drafting up a letter, and as per like our issues policies, we actually passed it that like the SFSS. We endorse like the 2% limit being extended to international students for their tuition limit. So we will be signing on to that, just letting you know. If you have questions for it, let me know. I will be sharing the letter with you folks, just so like you know what we're signing on to and making sure that like we understand the language. Let me know if you have any questions. It should be coming in maybe a couple months or so, but just so you know, that's something that we will be looking into, and we might have like a rally and stuff. So if execs can show up to that too, that'd be awesome. But yeah, that's it.
Great, thanks, Ishana. Anyone want to add to this discussion? Okay, Arthur, you have the floor.
Okay, I'm sorry. One second, because my computer is being slowish to heck today, so I don't know why it's lagging a little bit. So, but what I want to say is that I think it's a good idea because like a bunch of international students aren't exactly like. I kind of feel like a lot of the time when we talk about international students, and some of those have sort of like included out of the conversation with sort of like how we do things and stuff. So I definitely do want to see more international students get involved with how we do things and how like we're going to go around with the in terms of governance and like other involvement sort of thing. So I think that it's definitely something we should push for because like international students really have way much enough for tuition that they're paying for in terms of coming to SFU. And I know we have the tuition fee thing that is kind of working on. So I think that we should also push for that because it would just be fair for them to be having more than fair for them to have to pay for so much tuition and be able to participate in feeling comfortable in our environment. So I just think that it's a good thing too. So
Great. Thanks, Arthur. Anyone else? Before we move on, we have a few other discussion items to get through as well. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we're going to head over to the next discussion item. That is hours of work survey. Judith, this is your discussion item. You have the floor.
Yeah, so as some of you may remember this, the hours of work survey pertains to basically how long the sub is open, how our operations are run and such. As your TLDR, you remember that we pre-approved it at exec and then we approved it at council and now things are getting done. There's a lot going on, but I'm going to hand the floor to Sindhu because I submitted this on her behalf. And I think my contributions to this project are kind of nearing the end.
Thanks, Judith. Yeah, so I think you covered it. So the question bank regarding the sub hours were approved at council at the end of August. And since this was in consultation with the union, it was taken to them and approved with minor changes recently. So the hope is to get student consultation to measure the effectiveness of the current sub hours. So we have until April to distribute and the survey and compile the data. So we're hoping to get moving on this. So, and I wanted to give exec a heads up that this will probably be happening soon. I gave some of the staff a heads up that will be helping me with this. So that was the update there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sindhu. Judith, do you have another list?
Yeah, I have a question. I guess for Sindhu. We already approved the question bank. What kind of changes were made to it? Like, did they make the changes to the one that goes to our membership, the ones that goes to our staff? Because there's two question banks. Because if they made the changes, because we already approved them, I don't know if we need to reapprove them again, if they're like actually substantial changes, unless like typos or such, because the language is important when it comes to surveys. I just want to know like what was changed on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great question, and that's something that hopefully you all can answer for me as well. It was changed on the member survey, so it was just to provide some additional context for folks. So just in terms of services that folks used in the student union building, the union just added some additional resources that may have been missed. And then in terms of just utilizing any trauma-informed services, just building out the examples of the services that we provide that might be useful for students. So they were just clarifying some of the questions, but I can resend it to exec to look over and see if you think this is something that needs to go back to council or if it's fine the way it is.
Thank you, Sindhu. Any further discussion on this? Yep, Judith, you have the floor.
Those question banks have been prepared for months before we even took them for approval. Like, everyone signed off on it and they were given to us to approve. So we can go ahead with the survey distribution. I guess I won't have an answer to this because nobody's a mind reader here, but I think it's interesting how like last minute it was changed. But that's all.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Okay, I'm not seeing any more discussion on this, so we'll go ahead to the next discussion item. Hang on. Next discussion item is social media comments management guidelines. Judith, this is your discussion item. You have the floor again.
Sorry, my computer did not let me unmute. Yeah, so I just wanted to circle back to this. This is in relation to an email we got like in the summer semester, but I guess it got buried in everybody's inbox. It's in relation to social media comments management. That's flagged to us by our communication staff. I have a couple thoughts on this, so I'm just gonna like give my preemptive like ramble on this. I do think as an organization, we should have something in place because, and I think to some degree we do have something in place because there is this implicit thing that we do when we do like close the sub for like stat holidays and such. Ever since the sub closure in the spring, we now disable the comments feature on those posts. That's already done, has been going on ever since the first sub closure has happened. So I guess I'm just wanna give us that operational like backing where we know what can be managed on social media and how and what can be done if somebody posts something derogatory or something problematic on our social medias, because obviously we should not be condoning those things, and sometimes people post things that the Instagram algorithm does not catch, for example. So there is a guideline prepared. I did share it. I'm gonna drop it in the chat again in case people missed the doc. But I just want to discuss it and just flag it back to exec to see what we're thinking and what we can tell Ilham. I'm also happy with taking this to governance and adding into communications policies, whichever works best. But I do want to make sure our comm staff has that kind of backing where they can make relevant calls if needed, because it is their portfolio. And to be frank, they're the ones seeing those comments first and it impacts them the most. So we should also be looking to protecting our staff as to what they're like faced with when it comes to these kind of interactions online, because everybody is very, very brave online. Half the people would not have the guts to say the things they say online in person to somebody's face. So we should not allow for people to be treated like that in this organization. But I did want to open it up to discussion and see what people think, because I know Arthur, for example, you're probably seeing this for the first time. So yeah.
Arthur, you have the floor. Arthur, I think you're muted. You might need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second, because my computer lagging, my room lagging. Okay, anyway, so I think that, yeah, we're gonna have to have a long talk about online presence, because take yesterday AGM for example. We've seen a bunch of people like, you know, I think Judith's right that a bunch of people would have said something like this in person compared to when they're like being able to rename themselves on the internet or using a fake name or something. So I think that it's definitely warranted that for the safety of not just the exec, but also that for the safety of other people who want to interact online now more than ever, to protect that space from potential personal attack against another person. So I think definitely warranted, but I also think that I don't want it to become like a slippery slope where we think that we do this and the next person comes along, they change it and it do something worse. I do not want that on my computer. But I think that we definitely should have something in place, because I do not want any person, not just the students, but also the staff, to come in harm's way because of things that are occurring online. So it's something that we should look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Cindy, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Judah covered a lot of what I was going to say, but from my understanding, the comms team was previously using their judgment to delete comments, and there was some that were a little problematic. And so as of right now, when they see a problematic post, it goes through many chains of people, which causes delays on how we should respond. And that's really been impacting us negatively. So I think these guidelines would help the team immensely so that they can continue to use their judgment based on guidelines that we collaborated on. And I would recommend that this goes under the communications policies.
Okay, thank you, Sindhu. Ella, you have the floor.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation a little bit. It had been a while since I'd seen the comment management guidelines. And I think for myself, I'm not particularly in favor of blocking users from commenting in specific cases. I think if it's cases of obviously discriminatory, racist, offensive, defamatory content, I understand that. But at the end of the day, also, this is a democracy and folks should be able to vocalize whether or not that they dissent on whatever avenues we have available. That's what this entire governance model is for. That being said, I do understand that sentence, and I wouldn't necessarily be against removing that sentence, the sentence on blocking users from commenting in cases of bullying, harassment, discriminatory, defamatory, and or offensive language. But what the problem I have is that piece on the SFSS social media not being intended for political or ideological debates. At the end of the day, again, this is a political organization, whether we like it or not. You all exist, or you all ran on slates coming into this space. It is a political organization, and on the obviously on the staff side, we want to keep the politics of it as much as possible out of it. But my entire problem here is that overwhelmingly it is folks of color or folks that do not have direct access to us in these spaces, or don't feel comfortable entering these spaces, that choose to use social media as a way to communicate with us. Figuring out a way to do this equitably and in a way that doesn't necessarily leave space, like Arthur was saying, later on for folks to be targeted specifically just because they have dissenting voices, is what I'm looking for here. And I think I need that to be specifically outlined within this document, so that that also doesn't come around on us, right? I know folks' intentions overwhelmingly are not to leave spaces for people to be harmed. I know overwhelmingly all of you come from that place, but I think this needs to be fleshed out a little bit so that that intention is actually expressed here, so that it also saves us in the long term, because I know that ultimately there's going to be pushback on this coming from the fact that the SFSS, whether we like it or not, is a political organization.
Okay, thank you, Ella. Judith, you have the floor.
Yeah, I agree. But then if we're looking at that, then I am questioning as to why the last board decided to lock comments on space closure posts. Because ever since then, we no longer allow comments on those posts. So if we are going to be all about people interacting with us, I suggest we unlock those posts. That's one. And the other thing is, while we are a political organization, we are also a place of employment for our staff members. I do not want to put our communication team in the position where they are afraid to make the call when they see that the post or a comment on there that's derogatory towards someone or harassing someone. I don't want to put them in a position where then they will be taken up on progressive discipline just because they did what they thought was the right thing to do. I think we should give them the guidelines that they can fall back on to do that and to delete things that have to be deleted. Because ultimately, it's not fair to them to have to make that call without any guidelines on their own, because that's on them. And at the same time, if they have to be escalated, it usually goes to, I think, the president and the operations organizer, and sometimes it goes to me as well. It's also in a position where we're in the wrong position, especially executives or counselors, to make that call, because as much as we don't like it, we are held to two standards. As an employer, we have a responsibility, and as unfortunately, as a elected representative, we also have the responsibility of different things. For the membership, we should keep it up. For staff, we should take it down. So how do we make that call without us getting into trouble? Those guidelines are helpful, not just for the communications team, but also for executives to come forward to figure out what to do with content that should not be on our social medias. Because ultimately, we are a corporation, and we should try to have some kind of guidelines in place regarding what our staff can and cannot do, and what escalatory steps they can take. Because otherwise, it will be delayed. In terms of like our actions and how we do things. And at the same time, if we don't have guidelines and our team are in a position where they have to take action because they couldn't get an answer from the VP internal or the president or somebody, then it's on them if they take the action. I am team give our staff guidelines, because without that, they're exposed. And I think we should not be against that to any capacity, because we do have a lot of unionized staff here. Because that's a liability in an organization if they do not have the guidance to how they can act in their role.
Okay, thank you, Judith. Ella, you have a direct response?
Yeah, I was just gonna jump in and say, like, overwhelmingly, again, Judith, I do understand where you're coming from, and I do agree that there needs to be guidelines for our staff. Like, I want to just make that clear. What I am saying is that I think this needs to be fleshed out a little bit, because what I'm seeing overwhelmingly and what I have seen is that there is opportunity here, whether or not it's your board down the line, to be able to like use this as a way to silence dissenting folks, whether or not they agree with the decisions that are made here, but like by us at this table. In terms of the subclosure, to be honest, it was getting to a point where it did hit that discriminatory and offensive language in the comments, which is why I was in support of closing those particular comments. I don't quite understand why we still do it now, though I do respect that that is something that the communications department needs to do in order to like manage how content comes in. What I'm saying is that I think that there needs to be more information here about what folks can and cannot do, and what constitutes bullying as outlined within our policies, what constitutes as harassment, even if it's like a attachment to our policies, making sure that folks actually read our policies and know what exactly I identify as those particular things. I don't want there to be a situation in which specific students are being targeted just because they're dissenting. That's what my issue is. But like overwhelmingly, I'm in support of the guidelines. I think they're like, they need to happen. We need to give Ilham something. But I hope that you get where I'm coming from.
Okay, just looking at the speakers list, I see Judith with a direct response, Arthur with a direct response, and then we have Ishana on the list, Abby on the list, and then Sindhu. And just to not make sure we're digressing from conversation, keeping it conducive to our time, I will end off the speakers list with Sindhu. So let's get right on into that. Judith, your direct response. You have the floor.
I agree with Ella on like making sure comms does actually have something, but I do want to flag that there is a bit of a double standard here, because we did have people on a post back in the summer who was referred to, I think the comment is now gone, or it was up there for a while, person who was called the N-word on the post, who was also in reference to one of our Black counselors. We should be able to take that down immediately. That should not be a question here. And I think because of who it wasn't. And that's not fair. So yeah, that should be done now. I think comms should have the opportunity to take that down immediately without being afraid that they're getting into trouble. And I think there's a huge difference between being a dissenting voice and being respectful about it versus bullying. Because we are seeing a lot of bullying that isn't just dissent, but straight up bullying. So there's a difference between being a dissenting voice and being a bully. And I think we should define that. I definitely agree. We should define it, what that looks like. But we need to acknowledge that we do have a lot of comments on our Instagram right now. They're just purely bullying comments, not just dissent, but spreading misinformation and just being a bully. And that's not helpful for us. The members should see misinformation as well. But I did want to flag that. I'm going to cede my time so we can move on to the next person.
Arthur, you have a direct response.
Okay, so can everybody hear me? All right,
Yes.
cool. Okay, cool. So I agree with Ella. Is that something has to be held on in terms of like how do we define what's harassment, what wasn't? Even though sometimes it can be obvious, sometimes it can be really obvious. Sometimes it can be underhanded and nobody knows they were offensive with anything. And I think that there is a difference between stifling free speech versus protecting a staff and other students, and not just us. I'm agreeing with Ella that like it is a political space, no matter how we look at it at the end of the day. But I just think that we need to have a concrete line where we draw the line between, okay, this is too much for a student organization to handle, because at the end of the day, we're a student. We're not here to like make enemies or do anything to like give advice to anyone. We're not. But I just think that there has to be something that we can do to ensure that like we're not stifling free speech, because that is a slippery slope. It has been a conversation around like communication study. If you look at any communication courses, they're going to tell you this is a really slippery slope and really tricky, because they're going to tell you that like to what extent of free speech is going to like protect people from attacking someone else. Like there has to be a line drawn there somewhere. So I think that it's just I don't know. It's gonna be tricky to draw a line somewhere, but I just think that it is something we should be doing for sure.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. We're gonna go back to the speakers list. We have Abby, remind me again, it's Ishana, yes, okay, thank you, perfect.
Ishana,
you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to echo what Ella said. I feel like we definitely need to have guidelines, especially for staff, so they know what to look at. You can see the comments that I made. Ilham actually added them if folks want to look at that. I think that we should definitely keep working on this. There are spaces where we can really flesh things out and then hopefully come to consensus with this. So then we can look at it. But yeah, I just want to say we definitely should have guidelines. I feel like we can work on this together, flesh it out. And yeah, just please look at the comments that I made on that sheet, and then hopefully we can come to a consensus later on.
Thank you, Ishana. Next, Abby, you have the floor.
Thank you. Ishana, I'm gonna respectfully disagree with the comments you left on that draft. As far as blocking users from commenting in the case of bullying, harassment, discriminatory, defamatory, or offensive language, I think that's totally appropriate. Bad faith conversations don't benefit anybody. If someone's just there to insult people, That's not benefiting them, that's not benefiting the executive, and that's not creating anything constructive. That's just creating toxicity, and no one benefits from toxicity. As far as this being a political organization, I agree with that to some degree. However, if we look at the actual language, it just says that platforms are not intended for that. It doesn't actually stop that from happening. So if people are having political debates but keeping it civilized and respectful, I don't see anything on this that says that should be removed. So again, if we're going to encourage a more welcoming area to debate, I think if anything, this will make it a more welcoming area and have more people comfortable to comment on our Instagram posts and create more engagement within the SFSS. Because a lot of the reason people stay away is because it looks so toxic, it looks so vicious. You know, you come to the AGM and there's just people yelling at Helen for 16 minutes. Who wants to come see that? Right? My friends stayed away. They're like, oh, look at that. I'm not going to that. Like, I think this is a really good step in the right direction to taking down the barriers to the SFSS and allowing the average student to get involved with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Last on the speakers list is Sindhu.
Yeah, thank you. And I think a lot of what I was going to say was addressed. We brought this here to expand and collaborate. So this is helpful. Ultimately, staff were hired for their expertise, and these guidelines were created based on their experiences of what they were seeing and things that need to be addressed in order to do their job in a timely manner. So I know the team is more than happy to work on this until we expand to something that is feasible and something that we need to do. But we're seeing issues even the past few weeks where staff particularly don't know how to handle things, and responses may get dropped. So I would ask that we all take a look at these again and work on this so we can give them something to work with. And as for future execs, the expectation I would hope would be that they would work with staff who have institutional knowledge and context, and would hopefully have built this into their SOPs and policies, so would be able to explain the rationale, and then we would only build forward instead of causing more harm. So that's it for me. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Sindhu. I'm going to cut off discussion on this item now, and we need to move on. Thank you for the debate, everyone. We're now going to go over to the last discussion item on the agenda today, which is my discussion item, scheduling next executive committee meeting. Okay, so this is a very simple one here. Our next scheduled executive committee meeting is in 2 weeks' time, being November 11th. However, that day is a stat holiday, which means we won't have any unionized staff working on that day whatsoever. So I'd like to ask the executive if folks would be willing to move our executive committee meeting to the next Friday, which is November 18th, which means it'll give admin and ourselves 3 weeks time to prepare for that meeting. I just want to hear if folks would be willing to do that. I got I'm good from Ashana. I want to hear from other execs. Are we cool with that? Yep, sounds good. Arthur gave his thumbs up. That's great. Abby, you have the floor.
So question, would then the executive committee repeat every 2 weeks after that, or would it go back to like the next week after? Like, would it go back to the normal schedule?
Good question. I will unfortunately have to make another change to our executive committee meeting schedule, and it will go back to like 2 weeks. So we have the executive committee meeting on November 18th, and then in 2 weeks' time from there, we will have the next executive committee meeting, and therefore our executive committee working sessions will also be altered. Is that clear? Does that clarify?
Got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. Since everyone's on board, I saw some thumbs up. Everyone gave some affirmatives in the chat. I will be moving the next executive committee meeting over to November 18th, which
Sorry,
means
Helen, should add a
everyone-
list.
Okay. Judith, you have the floor.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, because I know FASC is also scheduled for Fridays from 10 a.m., which
Ooh.
conflicts with the time. The only reason I'm bringing up is because the way it's scheduled based on what you and Abby discussed was like FASC is now scheduled on the weeks where there's a working session instead of an exec meeting. So
Right.
when I'm not at run an exec, the FASC is next week. So if we're moving the exec schedule, then Abby will also have to move the FASC schedule unless Abby wants to call FASC on like a monthly basis. I'm not sure what he wants to do, so I'm going to defer to him.
Okay, thanks for the flag, Judith. Abby, you have the floor.
Yeah, what I can do then is I can call the next one for the 25th. That should be the next working session, right? The 25th? Like after the executive meeting?
Give me a sec. So today we have an exec meeting. Next week is a working session, which is November 4th. The next week, November 11th, would have been the executive committee, but we need to move that. The next week would be a working session on the 18th. And then November 25th would have been the next executive committee meeting.
So, but now it's going to be on the 18th, right?
I can do that, but then I want to hear from you about your FASC meeting. What are you
Yeah.
wanting to do about it?
So I'm saying if you do the 18th, then I'll do my FASC meeting on the 25th and then the 9th and go on a bi-weekly recurring basis from there.
Okay, if you agree to that, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so with that being said, we're all good in having the next executive committee meeting on November 18th. Yep. Okay, thanks everyone. That is it for discussion on that item. I'll make sure to get that updated on our Google calendars. Awesomeness. That concludes our discussion items for the day. We are now going to go over to the next item on the agenda, which is going in camera. The motion reads, be it resolved to go in camera for the remainder of the meeting. Can I have a mover for this motion?
VP external.
Okay, VP external moves. Someone to second.
VP Finance.
VP Finance seconds. I'm going to be opening the floor for discussion here. Again, we only have one in-camera discussion item called a new club proposal issue. Seeing no further discussion, we will take a vote on the question. I'm going to seek unanimous consent here. Seeking unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, the motion to go in camera is carried. Abby, I'm going to ask you to open up the breakout rooms while I pause the recording. We'll see everyone in the in-camera session. Hi, everyone. We are back. Next on the agenda is the motion to go ex camera. The motion reads, be it resolved to go ex camera for the remainder of the meeting. May I have a mover for this motion?
VP external.
VP external moves and someone to second.
VP Finance.
I'll give that to VP Equity. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. I'm going to seek unanimous consent here. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, the motion to go ex camera is carried. Next on the agenda is adjournment. The motion reads, be it resolved to adjourn the meeting at 11:23 a.m. May I have a mover for this motion?
VP external.
VP external moves and someone to second.
Equity second.
VP Equity seconds. I'm going to open the floor for discussion. Seeing none, we'll take it to a vote. I'm going to seek unanimous consent here. Seek unanimous consent. If you wish to dissent, please do so by using the raise hand function in Zoom. Seeing none, the motion to adjourn the meeting is carried. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We'll see you on November 18th for the next executive committee meeting. Take care.